Okay, we're going to talk about what I would call self-abuse. And the first situation that arises is Aunt Jane flies off to Las Vegas with the plumber. And she's, what, 72, 73. She's a widower, and she's staying at a high-end hotel on the Strip, probably spending a lot of money gambling and going to shows. You can approach this story from two viewpoints, one from hers or one from the relatives that's concerned about her. Of course, there's actually a third viewpoint you could view this from, and that would be the plumber's viewpoint. But I don't think the plumber is watching this, so we don't have to just get into that. From her standpoint, if she's legally competent, and as long as the plumber isn't forcing her to do things, she is free to do what she wants. Being legally competent, being an adult means that you have the right to make your own decisions, even if they're stupid, and even if it means that you're going to spend all your money and leave your kids none. She might even recite a poem for you by Edna St. Vincent Millay. My candle burns at both ends. It will not last the night. But ah, my foes and ah, my friends, it gives a lovely light. So she's just sowing oats. From the relative standpoint, they may have valid concerns about her. You might get a guardianship, which would mean that a judicial finding that she's legally no longer competent, and that means that she couldn't spend money, get access to her bank accounts and things like that. You can get an emergency guardianship, and obviously you're going to need to have a lawyer do that. Now, let's talk a little, and also, by the way, if you think that the plumber is bringing undue pressure on your aunt, that could likely be a criminal violation as well. So if you think that that's going on, you might also want to talk to one of your local prosecutors. Okay, what about booze as another problem of self-abuse? Unfortunately, we can't drink now like we could when we were younger. 2 or 3 beers at the age of 70 has the same effect of 4 or 5 at the age of 50. A lot of alcohol abuse will lead to problems of sleep, will increase arthritis pain, may do heart damage, cause automobile accidents, lead to depression. And oftentimes alcohol will render other medication that you might be taking either ineffective or toxic. Interestingly, the rate of alcoholism among elders is much less than among the general population. It's like 1% or 1.5% of people over 70, whereas people under 40, it's 4%. Why is that? Interestingly, maybe the alcoholics die early. Just talking about plumbers, it's interesting that plumbers die much earlier than people who conduct symphonies, conductors. And one might conclude, well, that's because conducting symphonies is a lot safer than being a plumber. Well, probably not. It's because people become plumbers at the age of 18, whereas you start conducting symphonies way over the age of 40. So always be leery of statistics. If you think that a loved one is abusing alcohol, it's tough to talk about that. One question you might want to ask him or her, say, well, have you talked to your doctor about how alcohol plays with the medications that you have? And indeed, you can, if you want to, you can phone the doctor and say, I have these concerns. Doctors are pretty good at this problem. The good news is that you don't have to totally stop drinking, and also seniors who get in any kind of treatment programs do a whole lot better because they show up to meetings and they take the regimen much more seriously. Okay, what about the more serious, or not the more serious, but the really serious problem of suicide? Seniors lead all age categories across the board in the rate of suicide. White males lead the pack. So if you have a loved one that seems to be suicidal or is talking about suicide, take that seriously. Same advice if you have a teenager. If they're talking about suicide, take it seriously because that's a possibility. In another segment, I'm going to talk about some statutes in Oregon and Washington called Death with Dignity. And both of those statutes allow, under certain circumstances, physicians to prescribe medication that the patient can take to end their own life. What I'm worried about here, though, is, or what you should be worried about, is people committing suicide because they're very depressed and it's a very rash decision. If you think of that the person it might do that, try to get the person help. One of the things you might consider is if the person is suffering from a mental condition and is presenting a danger to themselves, and suicide would be, or a danger to another, state statutes allow for what is known as civil commitment. And there would be a hearing, and if the judge found that the person was a danger to himself or to others, they could be committed to a psychiatric facility to try to stabilize them in the short term. What about guns? Handguns are the choice of most suicides. They're easy, they're quick. Most violence, by the way, is between spouses. And just because, and most violence between spouses is of recent origin. When people retire, when people get older, they may change. So just because you're happy now as a couple doesn't mean 6 months from now or a year from now you're going to be happy. So you got to consider whether or not it would be good to have a gun, particularly a handgun, in the house if you got into a huge fight. If you do have a gun, you want to prevent people from using it in a fight, and you want to make sure that if the person's suicidal, that at least it takes some time to access the gun. So first of all, you want to keep the gun locked. You want to keep it unloaded. You should take a gun safety course. And by the way, if you're driving and you have a gun in the car and you're stopped by the police, so you're advised to keep your hands on the steering wheel and tell the officer, I've got a gun in the car. Because otherwise, if they come across the gun and you haven't told them about that, that can go very, very badly. What about self-protection? Guns for self-protection. First of all, don't put up a sign out front of your house, protected by Smith & Wesson. The problem is a thief will see that and will break into your house to get your Smith & Wesson. Second of all, if you have a gun in the house and you have a burglar and you bring out a gun, you've obviously upped the stakes. Probably more likely someone's going to be seriously injured, either the burglar or you. However, you have to balance against that danger by knowing that in fact people with guns may feel more secure in their lives. And maybe that sense of security outbalances the risk that you have with having a gun. However, if you want to have a gun for self-protection, you might want to consider having a rifle. One of the advantages of a rifle is that they are not used very frequently to commit suicide, so you kind of minimize that danger. The best rifle, of course, is to get a shotgun. And the reason you want to get a shotgun is that you don't have to aim very well if you have to shoot a burglar. Vice President realized one time that you don't have to aim very well with a shotgun. And it is very, very sobering for a burglar to be in someone's house in the middle of the night to hear a shotgun being cocked.